Our work is about the importance of institutions, some long-standing and some recent, social, economic, and political arrangements for inclusive prosperity. So the question of who becomes rich at the country level, but also at an individual level, and who stays poor. And of course, there are around the world today an enormous number of people who are very poor, despite all the progress we've made as humans over the past 250 years. When you allow people to have more effective political voice, when you provide more transparency, when elites are subject to effective and reasonable forms of competition, you get better political outcomes and you get better economic outcomes too. So the British figured this out the long, hard way in the 19th century. The Americans had a civil war in which this absolutely featured as an important element, and then a long fight for civil rights. And many other countries have taken their own paths. So it's not one size fits all. There are many countries that have chosen quite different institutional arrangements. Japan, for example, made up its own mind. It did a mix and match at the end of the 19th century. Took some time for that to turn into inclusive prosperity, but it did, and it has. So there's many ways to do it, but focusing on that, what will deliver inclusive prosperity through inclusive, legitimate political participation, I think that turns out to be the key. I think there's a lot of pressure on democracy in the United States. Actually, I don't think it. I mean, we all see that. And the key issue is, do you accept the results of legitimate, free and fair elections? So not accepting the result of the 2020 election, instigating people to attack Congress on January 6, 2021. These are big problems. And these are the kinds of actions that have historically, in other situations, really undermined democracy. And that means undermining the economic basis of shared prosperity. So we'll see what happens in November. But when you have rules, you need to play by the rules, and everyone needs to play by the rules. And when you try to break the rules, overthrow the rules, not respect the rules, that leads to a lot of trouble. So a lot of people who were previously in the middle class were hit very hard by the combination of globalization, automation, the decline of trade unions, and a sort of shift, I would say, more broadly in corporate philosophy. So instead of workers being a resource to be developed, which they were in the 19th and early 20th century, they became a cost to be minimized in many settings. Now that squeezed the middle class, and my colleague, David Autor, with whom Dron and I run a research center at MIT, he has some very famous graphs showing that real wages for people with a lot of education have gone up since the 1960s in the US. But if you only had a college education, or worse, less than a college education, you're flat for male wages, or you've gone down since the 1960s. Right? So that's the squeeze of the middle class. And David also emphasizes very important concept of job polarization. So that job polarization, the top does really well, the lower has disappeared or shrunk and got pushed down to the bottom. That, of course, makes people very angry. And I think we have, as a country, failed to deliver in recent decades on what we were previously very good at, which was sharing prosperity. And Dron and I wrote a book, Power and Progress, Our 1,000-Year Struggle Over Technology and Prosperity, came out last year, trying to link it to today's technological choices. Because I do think AI could go either way. AI could either empower people with a lot of education, make them more highly skilled, enable them to do more tasks and get more pay, or it could be another massive wave of automation that pushes the remnants of the middle down to the bottom. And then, yes, you're not going to like the political outcomes. We should recognize that China has had a good run, but sustaining this prosperity now is going to be difficult. I think all countries struggle with that. And to my mind, the arrangements they have in China have not become more inclusive at the political level in recent decades. They've become more, let's call it, elite driven. And what our work says, and is a historical pattern, it doesn't mean something bad happens the next month or the next year, but as a historical pattern, when you get that elite driven type of outcome, it's harder to share prosperity, to sustain growth.